Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping right into something major, high stakes, really dominating the news right now. We're talking about the recent missile attack on a U.S. military installation. Specifically, we're going to unpack the events around the attack on the U.S. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we're relying on recent reports, mainly from sources like CBS News, ABC News. It gives us a good snapshot of, events and the reactions as they stood on June 23rd, 2025.
Right. And our goal here is really to break down the specifics of the attack itself, but also, crucially, understand the context, right? Like the U.S. strikes that came just before it, and then sort of map out the complex political fallout both across the Middle East and back here in the U.S. We want to give you a clear, digestible picture of this rapidly evolving situation, get you the key takeaways.
Absolutely. Let's start with the basics, what actually happened on the 23rd. So the target was the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. It's southwest of Doha. And this place is, well, it's vital. It's the forward HQ for CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command. Thousands of U.S. personnel are based there.
Okay, so a major target. And Iran, they claimed responsibility pretty quickly.
They did. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, put out a statement. They said they hit the base with a devastating and powerful missile. They even gave the operation a name. Annunciation of Victory.
Annunciation of Victory, that's quite a name. What's the thinking there, do you suppose? Especially when the U.S. is saying damage was minimal.
Well, naming it like that, it's messaging, isn't it? Projecting strength, framing it as a success, regardless of the actual physical impact for domestic audiences, international ones too. And the U.S. side did confirm an attack happened. The defense official said, yes, short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles were fired,
Yeah.
and they came from Iran.
Okay, so missiles confirmed. What was happening on the ground in Qatar? What were people seeing and hearing?
Well, there were reports pretty quickly of explosions being heard around Qatar. Even some photos apparently showed missiles in the sky over Doha. Qatari officials, they confirmed the strike happened. But they also said their air defenses kicked in, intercepted the missiles successfully, and importantly, they reported no injuries on their end.
And Qatar's reaction, they weren't happy.
No, not at all. Very strong condemnation. They called it a, quote, flagrant violation of sovereignty, airspace, international law, the UN Charter, and they explicitly said they reserved the right to respond. The immediate effects spread, too. Air raid sirens went off in Bahrain. That's where the U.S. Fifth Fleet is headquartered. Bahrain temporarily closed its airspace. Qatar did, too, and Qatar Airways had to suspend all flights. So, yeah, immediate regional disruption.
A real ripple effect.
Right.
Now, what about casualties or damage at the U.S. base itself? That's the key question, I guess.
Right. And the crucial point here is no reports of any U.S. casualties. President Trump commented on it. He said no Americans hurt and that hardly any damage was done. He described the attack itself as very weak and also expected, and he asserted it was very effectively countered.
He gave specifics, too, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Something about the number of missiles?
He did. He mentioned Iran firing 14 missiles, said 13 were knocked down by defenses, and the one that wasn't, he said it was set free because it wasn't actually heading towards anything threatening. I mean, 13 out of 14, if that's accurate, that is a remarkably high intercept rate. Makes you wonder about the Iranian calculation.
Yeah, it does. But here's the part that really stood out to me. President Trump also thanked Iran.
Yes, that was quite the statement. He thanked Iran for giving us early notice, saying that this notice made it possible for no lives to be lost, no injuries.
Early notice for a missile attack. How does that even work? What does that tell us?
It's fascinating, isn't it? It really challenges our usual ideas about how these things work. It suggests maybe less of a surprise attack and more of a very high stakes, maybe even pre-signaled exchange. This concept of managed escalation, perhaps.
Yeah.
It hints at a level of back-channel communication or signaling, maybe. It's complex.
Managed escalation. So let's talk about that escalation. This Iranian attack didn't just happen randomly?
No, definitely not. It came just 2 days after the U.S. carried out its own strikes. The U.S. hit 3 Iranian nuclear sites. They used B-2 bombers, dropped these huge bombs, 14 of them, massive ordnance penetrators, bunker busters.
Yeah.
President Trump's assessment of that was monumental damage was done.
And those U.S. strikes themselves were part of a wider pattern, right?
Yeah.
With Israel and Iran involved, too.
Exactly. This followed, more than a week of back and forth. Israeli attacks on Iranian targets, Iranian strikes hitting Israel. It's all interconnected, a cycle of conflict.
And Iran had been signaling something like this might happen.
Oh, yes. The IRGC had put out statements just days before, on Sunday, saying the U.S. had basically put itself at the forefront of aggression. They hinted pretty strongly at attacking U.S. assets. They even warned that all those U.S. bases in the region, quote, are not a strength, but have doubled their vulnerability. Clear threat.
So if the warnings were there, and Trump mentioned early notice, was this attack then sort of anticipated?
It seems so. Reports indicate that U.S. and Qatari officials actually held meetings over the weekend and again Monday morning, specifically to prepare for this. The word used was that the retaliation was expected and also calibrated. The U.S. Embassy in Qatar had even put out an alert telling Americans there to shelter in place beforehand. So, yeah, beneath the surface of the dramatic event, there was definitely a level of anticipation preparation, almost choreographed in a dangerous way.
Okay, so let's pivot from the attack itself and the lead up to the political reactions, the fallout. How did leadership in the U.S. and Iran respond afterwards?
Well, President Trump, as we noted, mentioned the early notice. He also expressed hope that Iran could now move towards peace and harmony. And interestingly, he added he'd enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same, almost like trying to draw a line under this particular exchange.
Okay, so Trump suggesting de-escalation. What about Iran's leadership?
A very different tone. Supreme Leader Khamenei, he posted on social media, included a picture of a burning American flag and declared Iran will not surrender. He added, "We have not violated anyone's rights, nor will we ever accept anyone's violation." So very defiant, projecting resolve, not backing down.
Stark contrast there. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Congress is getting involved. Briefings scheduled.
Yes, classified briefings for all House and Senate members set for Wednesday. And the debate is already heating up. House Speaker Mike Johnson, the Republican leader, he defended President Trump's prior actions, the strikes on Iran. Johnson said the danger was imminent enough for the president to act under his authority. He also pushed back against calls for a war powers resolution right now, saying it's not the appropriate time.
But not everyone agrees with that assessment of imminence or authority.
No, definitely not. The House Minority Leader, Democrat Hakeem Jeffries, he directly questioned that. Jeffries stated Trump hadn't shown Congress any evidence that Iran posed an imminent threat before the U.S. strikes, and he stressed the constitutional point. Offensive military force needs approval from Congress, from the House and Senate. So you see that classic tension playing out. Executive power versus legislative oversight in foreign policy, especially in a crisis.
And this is fueling calls for Congress to assert itself more forcefully.
It is. For instance, Republican Congressman Thomas Massey, he's been vocal about the War Powers Act. He believes it requires the president to pull back from hostilities in Iran within 60 days unless Congress authorizes it. He mentioned that 57 lawmakers have signed on to his resolution pushing for that. So it's a live debate with real potential consequences.
Beyond the direct conflict and the politics in D.C., what about wider security concerns, homeland security?
Right, that's a crucial piece. The State Department issued a new worldwide caution alert for American citizens, basically warning about the heightened tensions, advising increased caution abroad. They mentioned potential demonstrations targeting U.S. citizens or interests, plus, travel disruptions, airspace closures we've already seen.
And the Justice Department is involved, too.
Yes. Attorney General Pam Bondi testified about ongoing investigations. She mentioned countless open investigations related to threats to the homeland. She couldn't get into classified details about things like sleeper cells. But she did note that well over 1,000 Iranian nationals had entered the U.S. illegally over the last several years. And she stated the Justice Department is on high alert. It shows how these international events immediately raise domestic security concerns.
It really brings it home, doesn't it? How interconnected everything is. An event over there has ripples that reach right back here, impacting travel, security alerts, government focus.
Exactly. It's a stark reminder that these things aren't isolated. They have broad consequences.
Okay, so we've covered quite a bit. We've looked at the missile attack itself, the U.S. strikes that came before it, the claims and counterclaims, the regional disruption, the political debate in Washington, and even the homeland security angle. It really highlights how fast these situations move and how many layers there are to understand the chain of events, the different perspectives. It's a lot.
It certainly is. It's complex, dynamic, and still unfolding.
Which leaves us with, I think, a pretty interesting final thought to mull over. You mentioned President Trump's claim about getting early notice from Iran and the description of the attack as calibrated.
Yes, those elements really stand out.
So what does that combination suggest about how deterrence and maybe even this idea of managed escalation are working or changing in these kinds of conflicts today?
That's the big question, isn't it? How might this kind of dynamic, if it's real, reshape diplomacy, reshape military strategy, and maybe more importantly, what new challenges does it create for trying to keep the peace in a region that's already so volatile?
Something definitely worth thinking about as we continue to watch this develop. Thanks for joining us for this